Thank you so much for joining us and for your patience, which is on theme for today. I'm Annie Heckman, an associate translator with 84,000. I'm truly honored to serve as MC of our first Teachings on Sutra event of the new year, as we gather together to reflect and to honor Chötrul Düchen, the celebration of the Buddha's miracles. For today's event, we are offering Chinese, French, Portuguese, and Vietnamese interpretation. Please click the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen to select your preferred language, and I'll give everyone a few moments to do that. Now, I'm very excited to introduce Venerable Matthieu Ricard, who is joining us from Nepal. Venerable Matthieu is a Buddhist monk and world-known author, translator, and photographer. He first visited India in 1967, where he met great spiritual masters from Tibet. After completing his PhD in cell genetics in 1972, he moved to the Himalayas, where he has lived ever since. Venerable Matthieu has published a number of books, including The Monk and the Philosopher, Happiness, Altruism, and Notebooks of a Wandering Monk, along with 10 volumes of translated Tibetan texts and a dozen albums of photography. He donates all proceeds from his books and activities to support humanitarian projects in India, Nepal, and Tibet through Karuna Shechen, the nonprofit organization he founded in 2000, which now benefits 500,000 people every year. Venerable Matthieu will be sharing his insights on the topic Acceptance of the Profound Dharma, with close reference to 84,000's translation of the 9th chapter of the King of Samādhis Sūtra. We have provided a link in the comment box if you wish to download this inspiring text. Before we invite Venerable Matthieu to start the teaching, let us all recite the aspiration prayer for 84,000. So please join me, you see it on the screen. As peace, harmony, sanity, and the well-being of this earth and its inhabitants are now so endangered, may there never be a time when the world's media, school textbooks, and daily conversations stop using words like generosity, patience, and loving kindness, and when the meaning of such words is lost. As we fear the darkest hour of this dark age, may there never be a time when words like impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, selflessness, dependent arising, illusion, and emptiness cease to exist, and when their meaning is lost. May the endeavors of the translators and editors plant the seed of the Dharma in all directions. May the efforts of the patrons and administrators nurture and strengthen the shoot of the Dharma at all times. May the noble aspirations of this endeavor maintain and propagate the precious Dharma far and wide. This prayer was composed by Brahma Pushpa in India in June 2020. Thank you, everyone, for reciting the aspiration prayer together. Now, let us invite Venerable Matthieu Ricard to begin the teachings. Thank you so much, Venerable.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm so happy to join on this occasion of the month of miracle of Lord Buddha's life. And yes, from Nepal, we just completed a 7-day Vajrasattva Drupchen, led by Ramzan Rinpoche and all the monks of Session Monastery, some of the nuns. So maybe thanks to that, some of my thick obscuration might have been tint a little bit so that I cannot disgrace myself by joining you today. So first of all, I want to repeat that I accepted this invitation from my dear friend John Canty and all the wonderful team of 84,000 in homage of all our teachers. And, I'm not a teacher myself, but I consider that I can die in peace, having been incredibly fortunate to be in the presence for many, many years of exceptional great masters, like starting with Kyabje Kangyo Rinpoche, His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, Dönjam Rinpoche and many others, Trungpa Rinpoche, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and now also being a student of the next generation of close Dharma holders of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche's lineage. And so, although I don't have any of those necessary qualities to say much, neither of being learned nor of being accomplished, but say I have a fortunate years, so just simply all the wonderful teachings I receive are still resonating in my mind. So with due humility, I will share a few reflections on this wonderful sutra, the King of Samādhis Sūtra, which I have often seen quoted in many Tibetan scripture. It's one of the sutra that is very often quoted in various levels, mostly very often when referring to the definite meaning. So on the 84,000 website, you can find a complete translation of this sutra and a very learned introduction. So I'm not going to repeat any of these, but just to recall that it was given by Lord Buddha, mostly at the Vulture Peak mountain in Rajgir, not far from Bodh Gaya, and again, chiefly in response to a young layman called Chandraprabha. And it's quite auspicious that Chandraprabha means somehow the light of the moon, the moonlight, the moon radiance. And as you know, this is also the initial name that Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche received when he took Chötrul ordination from Khenpo Shenga, Rapsal Dawa, meaning brilliant moon. So we are in perfect harmony here. And so when we say samadhi, just to remind what is explained in the general introduction of the sutra, usually samadhi, ting, ne, zing, at least in Tibetan, ting means profound, ne is certain, and zing is to hold. So basically, is to acquire a definite knowledge on the profound meaning. So it's remaining in a kind of experiential state when you directly experience the profound meaning of the Dharma. So, samadhi sometimes is with people to go, oh, is in samadhi, sort of blissing out under a mango tree with 2 incense sticks on the side. And, people equate often with meditation. But in fact, it's much deeper than that. And it's being deeply, directly, again, experiencing the ultimate meaning that is beyond word, that is beyond expression, and so forth, beyond concept. As it says in the beginning of the 9th chapter of the Bodhicharyavatara, the ultimate truth is beyond the intellect. And so although it can be realized direct to direct experience, but the words and examples and anything else, especially conceptual elaboration, fail to describe it. So that's why here, but here samadhi has a much vaster meaning, and it's explained in various ways. But first, it's part of the name of the sutra itself, and also it covers, as it says in the introduction, an entire range of Buddhist practices, both on conduct, meditation, motivation, and realization of the ultimate truth. So in fact, within the corpus of the sutra, it enumerates over 300 of the samadhi's quality. And so, but basically, and that's also what the 9th chapter is about, is samadhi here refers to the way of revealing or the revealed equality of the nature of all phenomena. So what is meant by that equality in Tibetan Nampani? And so if we see some of the explanation, for instance, of some profound tantra like the Guhyagarbha Tantra, is basically about the great evenness or the great equality and the great purity. The great evenness in the sense of all phenomena are equal in the sense of both appearing and being devoid of inherent existence. So the union of appearance and emptiness is equally pertains all phenomenal world, including, of course, our consciousness, mental state. So that's basically the best way to finally describe the ultimate nature of phenomena. If we go on an analytical way of trying to establish a way of describing the nature of phenomena that cannot be refuted by any argument, like Lama Mipam Rinpoche said, in the end, we come to this concept of the union of appearance and emptiness. In that way, of course, we avoid both extremes. Phenomena appear, that's obvious. We can't deny that. So therefore, it is not a nihilistic perspective, and that will be nonsensical to claim that phenomena don't exist. But they don't exist in the way we ordinarily being perceive it, through naive realism, thinking that they do exist in a kind of permanent way, autonomous way, independent way, intrinsic way. They don't. If we pursue the analysis to its ultimate point, we come what? To emptiness. And again, emptiness is not pure nothingness, it's the very nature of phenomena. So as it says in the Prajnaparamita Hridaya, emptiness is form, form is emptiness. That means that the emptiness of this cup is not the absence of the cup, but the nature of the cup. It appears, yet it is empty of ultimate existence. And of course, we can proceed to understand that in the analytical way, breaking the cup into pieces, then into sort of atoms, and of course in the sort of lower views of the Buddhist philosophy, they speak of indivisible atom that exists on their own, but which is later refuted by other schools. But even we were speaking modern language, we could come to molecules, atoms, quarks, and then what? We come onto quantum vacuum. There's nothing we can catch, and therefore we can say that an ultimate analysis, what seems solid, permanent, existence, autonomous, existing on its own as a separate from the rest, is actually devoid of any of those mental attributes that we superimpose to the world of phenomena. So that's why here the essence of the King of Samādhis Sūtra is, as it says, samadhi is a revealed equality of the nature of all phenomena. So I don't have the capacity, time, and to offer reflection on the whole sutra. Some of the passage quite would need a lot of studies and a much more expert commentator. So by reason of sake of facility, I chose one I felt sort of I might have something to share, which is the 9th chapter on the patience of the Profound Dharma. So again, forgive me for all my divagation. This is not my fault if I'm here today. And I recently made a t-shirt where on front it says, please forgive me, and on the back I did my best. That's all I can do without any guarantee. So then, so in the 9th chapter, again, even within the 9th chapter, I've chosen some passages that I feel easy to share a few thoughts. So in a way, it says, for instance, that the revealed equality of the nature of all phenomena has given birth to all the Tathagatas, the Arhats, the perfectly enlightened Buddhas. Because it is the ultimate understanding of this ultimate truth and the union of the great sameness and the great purity, which is the primordial purity of all phenomena, that allows one, as we realize it, to achieve Buddhahood. And I remember when Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche gave a seminar here in Nepal some years ago, and he quoted the first words of the Buddha after achieving enlightenment. He was teaching on the two truths. And of course, the Buddha said, I found a truth which is profound, which is pacified or peaceful, pacified, which is luminous, which is free from concept, and which is uncompounded. And what Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche said at the time is, Lord Buddha could have stopped there, because everything was included, both the relative truth and ultimate truth, and the union of absolute and relative truth, which are not like the two horns of a cow, but the ultimate nature of the relative truth is ultimate truth, and within ultimate truth, the unfolding of phenomena is what we may call the relative truth. But he could have stopped there, and actually he did for a number of days, as you know, for 40 or 49 days, he remained silent, thinking that this is so profound, that who will understand that in this world where there's so much confusion? And then, as we know, Brahma offered him a golden wheel and Indra a conch and requested him to turn the wheel of the Dharma. So Lord Buddha proceeded to the deer park in Sarnath and met his former co-practitioner in ascetic practices, who, when seeing him, said, we are not going to prostrate to this Gautama. He betrayed us, he left the austerities. But when they came in the presence of Lord Buddha, they felt overwhelmed by his magnificence, and they, without control, they fell and prostrated on the ground at his feet. And then he gave his first sermon or first teaching on the Four Noble Truths, as you know, the existence of the truth of suffering. And by the way, you know, when some people say, oh, Buddhism is very pessimistic, it's all about suffering. But if we would say, like, hospitals is very bad, it's terrible because it's all about sickness. Well, the point of hospital is to identify and cure the, sorry, I'm running out of battery. Where is my? Yes. Oh, yes. Sorry. That's a distracted monk. Okay, so, yes. So then, of course, then he said that, yes, there is suffering, and if we don't know it, then that's a big problem, because we are in that state. But that's not enough. That's not just that. You know, if it was suffering came from the sky or without causes, or it was the will of some creator and we have no choice, then, you know, better relax and forget about suffering, not to compound suffering by being worrying about it. And then the main point, he said, there is a possibility of getting out of suffering. And then, of course, then there's a path, so the fourth truth. If there was no possibility, again, what's the use? We only feel pity towards sentient being, like seeing someone from the aeroplane that is lost in the ocean and trying to swim. We feel so sorry, but there's not much we can do. But if it happens that there is some cloud, mist, and there is an island very nearby where that person could swim towards, then maybe we'll try to indicate some sign or throw something, say, go that way. So as long as there is a possibility of the cessation of suffering, then there can be a path. So that was the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma. And so the Digo Khyentse Rinpoche always remind us that there are the three episodes of turning the wheel of the Dharma, at each a different function. And he said those three aspects are summarized in a famous sentence we find in the Prajnaparamita. Sem, the mind. Number two, sem machi, the mind somehow doesn't exist. Sem ki rongshing or sarwa, but its expression is luminosity. So that's closely referred to the three episodes, or the three turning of the wheel of the Dharma. The first, therefore, the Four Noble Truths in Sarnath, which is the examining how the mind works and how the mind can be our best friend or worst enemy and build up the causes of suffering. So in a way, because of delusion, we sort of are addicted to the cause of suffering. So the concept of renunciation that is often misunderstood is not to give up everything that is truly good in life. And then we can try to name those, but that would be absurd. But to give up the cause of suffering, that's what we are renouncing to. Renunciation is like a bird getting out of its cage. So it's not losing anything by renouncing its cage in a way. And then the second sentence, semla, semmachi, the mind doesn't exist, correspond to the second turning of the wheel, which is chiefly focused on emptiness. And why is mainly focused on emptiness and not sort of yet on the union of appearance and emptiness is because our main obstacle to be free from delusion is not our grasping to emptiness or to nothingness. Actually, it's grasping to the solid reality of phenomena, of life, of what people tell us or criticize us, or the ups and downs of life. Why me? Why not me? So we really solidify that, and that's why we suffer. So emptiness is a much needed antidote that we need to emphasize very strongly to get rid of all this, what is the all-pervading clinging of ordinary sentient beings that is clinging to solid reality. So, but then come the third aspect, Semki Ranshin Osalwa, the nature or the expression of mind is luminosity. Precisely, once one has at least approached emptiness sufficiently, then not to fall into one of the extreme of nihilism. We say, yes, but the nature of the mind, ultimate nature, its expression is luminosity. And luminosity here refers to the knowing aspect, to the wisdom aspect of the mind. That is, of course, part of the qualities of Buddhahood. We speak of 24 or 25 qualities of the Dharmakaya and so forth. So that's all the different manifestation and quality of Buddhahood by themselves and for the sake of sentient beings through the display of the three dimensions or the three kayas of Buddhahood, the ultimate nature, Dharmakaya, the body of perfect enjoyment, the Sambhogakaya, and the manifested body of the Nirmanakaya. So in that sense, this sentence of the Prajna Paramita sort of encapsulate in a very short and powerful way all the teachings of the Buddha. So again, when Zonsake Zenemushi said the Buddha could have stopped there, of course he could have, but no, probably might not have been enough for we ordinary beings, which usually are referred in Tibetan scriptures as children. Children in the sense of not the innocence of children, but more like naive, ignorant children who don't know much about things. So then everything else, the whole teaching that Lord Buddha gave throughout his life, and which now fills, as you know, in the Tibetan canon, 103 volumes of the Kangyo, that's 84,000 are so magnificently undertaken to translate. That was all meant to gradually bring us to that understanding. And why 84,000? As you know, 84,000 gateways to the Dharma, because everyone has different disposition. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama often used to say, if all the restaurants of the world were serving exactly the same food, basically we'll go once, but why should we go? So there will be so many different dispositions that need to be addressed by teaching that are adapted to the capacity, aspiration of beings. And that's also, we will see now about the patience, about the ultimate truth. If we were to give teaching on emptiness to someone who cannot comprehend it, it says in the teachings that their sort of brain or their head will explode because they cannot be able to bear those teachings so profound. So that's lead us to So here it says a little bit later in the sutra, and then Lord Buddha is speaking to Chandraprabha. He says, young man, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, who wishes to attain quickly the highest complete enlightenment of perfect Buddhahood, should become skilled in the patience of the profound Dharma. So patience, yes, or endurance, or forbearance, or whatever. This comes in the context of the teachings of the six transcendent perfection. And as you know, the sixth transcendent perfection is the practical engagement in the Bodhisattva vow first as an aspiration, which is, as it says in the Alankara Sutra, it is the altruistic wish to achieve enlightenment so as to become able to free all sentient beings. And I remember that Kenshin Pema Sherab, for whom I was fortunate to translate every year for almost 25 years, he keeps on reminding us that from the Mahayana perspective, we don't endeavor to achieve Buddhahood just to become Buddha and just sort of rest forever. The whole point is that after taking the Bodhisattva vows, first we find ourselves powerless. We are like a beggar who wants to offer a banquet to 100 beggars. No way. So we need to gain the capacity to free all sentient beings. That's the Bodhisattva vow. So it's not enough to make the vow. If it's totally powerless, then what's the point? So therefore, the true reason for someone who engages the Mahayana to wish to achieve Buddhahood has two sort of facets, or two prongs. One is to achieve Buddhahood, of course, and then to travel the path all the way. But the second one, which is in a way the motivation to do that, is so as to gain the capacity of free all sentient beings from ignorance, from suffering, remedying to the cause of suffering, and then analyzing those causes of suffering mostly as delusion or misconstruing reality by attributing permanence, autonomy, intrinsic existence, all those wrong perspective about nature of what we call reality. In English, reality means something that truly exists. So the ultimate of nature of so-called reality is precisely to be devoid of intrinsic reality. So then, once this aspiration has been done, there is an engagement aspect. It's like it says in the teaching, you wish to go to Bodh Gaya, that's the aspiration bodhicitta, or the bodhicitta in aspiration, the votive bodhicitta, and then actually engaging on the journey. So that's the practical or applied bodhicitta. So as you know, it has 6 or 10 paramita, which means transcendent perfection. And so the 6 first one, which are of course well known, being like generosity, discipline, patience, endeavor, or diligence, and then concentration and insight or wisdom. So now, why we say paramita, transcendent? So the first 5 only become transcendent when they are imbued with the view of the 6th one, the view of wisdom, that is without grasping to the solid reality of both the person who is practicing, the act of practicing, and the object of the practice. For instance, in the case of the perfection of generosity, when we make offering or when we give to those in need, that we clearly see, we call the 3 conceptual wheels, that so-called me as a subject, the act of giving and the recipient of giving are equally and that's where we come to the sameness or equality of all phenomena, are equally devoid of intrinsic existence. So if we have this view while practicing the first 5 paramitas, then they become transcendent, and that means that they truly contribute to the accumulation of the merit of wisdom, while in and of themselves they contribute to the accumulation of merit, but without the 6th paramita, they will not contribute fully to the accumulation of wisdom. So now, when we comes to this patience of the profound Dharma comes within the context of the paramita of patience. So in all the commentaries, and among those you can find, for instance, in the chapter on patience of the treasury of precious quality of the Rinzin Jimelimpa with the commentary of Kangyu Rinpoche. And in Tibetan, there are many other commentaries. Here at Session, now we are preparing an edition in Tibetan of 12 different commentaries on Jimelimpa's treasury of precious qualities. So each of those paramita is usually subdivided into several aspects, usually 3 aspects. In the case of patience or endurance, there's 3 types. One is endurance or patience toward all kinds of suffering that will affect us. The second one is endurance toward, more particularly, a different kind of harms that are done to us. So, and then the third one is the endurance toward the definite or ultimate meaning of the Dharma, that is the profound meaning, especially on emptiness. So that's in that context that here we speak of the one who wants to achieve the highest complete enlightenment of Buddhahood should become skilled in the patience of profound Dharma. So I think it's quite appropriate to speak a little bit more of those 3 types of suffering, of patience, sorry. So patience toward all suffering. So first of all, we need to be able to deal with suffering and not be overwhelmed by whichever type of suffering comes to us. Otherwise, we will, by being overwhelmed, so we become discouraged, powerless, and then we sort of lose any motivation to do anything, especially if we think that there's no way out of suffering. Then we become some kind of resignation or try to forget about it. And often we try to distract ourselves for all kinds of things. That's mostly what we do in samsara. As Jimmy Kenshin Rinpoche once said in one of his seminars, what ordinary people call happiness, we call it mostly suffering, because it's just a way of distracting oneself momentarily, and so that we don't see basically that samsara is beyond repair. There's no such thing as the samsara 2.0 that will be a bit nicer, with all kinds of beautiful things, sipping an orange juice, sitting at the beach and all that. Just temporary relief to fool ourselves that we're still completely immersed in samsara. So we need to be able to bear suffering, understand the nature of suffering, the cause of suffering, so that we eventually, suffering becomes one of the root motivation to overcome the cause of suffering and basically ignorance or distortion of reality, so that we may progress towards enlightenment. So suffering in and of itself, of course, is totally undesirable. There's no benefit from it. But since basically we cannot avoid it in our lives, there's always ups and downs. So the point here, by having endurance towards suffering, is actually to transform it in catalyst for engaging deeply in the practice of the Dharma that will eventually remedy to the most profound causes of suffering. And that's where The three levels of suffering is something very important to understand, because when the Buddha spread the truth of suffering, basically if we are just limiting this notion of suffering to having a toothache or something terrible happening in our life, basically we didn't really need the Buddha to know it's suffering. But he was also referring to the suffering of change. And very often we fool ourselves, oh, everything is so beautiful, everything goes so well. Once I met someone who told me, everything is perfect in my life, I would not change anything. So I mentioned that to Jimmy Kesson and Moshe, and he said, oh, either he's enlightened or he's really a little bit done. So anyway, so to see that is very important. So then, suffering of change is everything goes fine, and in the scripture is give the example of going to a picnic and happily so, and then someone is bitten by a snake and so forth. And then, but what really Lord Buddha meant is the all-pervading suffering that is invisible to our eyes as ordinary beings. And that is what will remain as long as ignorance and the output of, sort of the offspring of ignorance, which are the 84,000 afflictive mental states, or we can subsume them into 5, which is animosity, compulsive desire, lack of discernment, and pride and envy or jealousy. So all those mental poison actually arise basically from this basic misconception about reality, and which is the fundamental ignorance, which manifests as creating a gap between self and others, self and the world, because we assume that even though I've been a dynamic stream in constant change since I was born, I still assume that there is a core within that is an independent, autonomous, singular self, and that if it was just a philosophical view, that will not matter so much, but it's much more than that, because it triggers the chain reaction that leads to the 84,000 afflictive mental state. So, because once we believe there is such a core, then we say, oh, I must protect it, I must please it, and this endless, taking and giving, attraction, repulsion, and the host of the 84,000 then unfold. So that is why we need to examine that, find it is devoid of, again, intrinsic existence, it's just a labeled, a convenient illusion that we label to this dynamic stream, like the Ganges of the Mississippi River, but that there's no little head that pops up and say, I am the Ganges. And so that is the basic mistake that has profound repercussions. So this is why also next in the sutra, it says, young men, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should know that all phenomena are like illusion. He should know that all phenomena are like dreams, like mirage, like echoes, like optical illusions, like the moon on water, like hallucination, like reflection, like space. So as you can see, those examples or those analogies, when you say like the moon on water, it's not that there is nothing. There is a clear reflection of the moon, and if the water is very still, it's just almost indistinguishable with the moon. But it is not a solid moon. You cannot catch it. And like rainbows, Diego Geshe always to say, children might run to the rainbow and think they can catch it, but we cannot wear the rainbow as a dress. As we try to go toward it, it goes further away. So rainbow is not non-existent. It is clear, vivid, shining with these beautiful colors, but it doesn't exist on itself. It's just the result of many different interdependent conditions. There need to be a curtain of rain, the sun shining at a certain angle, and we being there as observer, and then there's a rainbow. You might think, oh, but the rainbow must have some kind, at least a bit of its own existence. But if you just remove the sun, that nothing is left, not a speck of the rainbow is left. So it was just purely the the crystallization of a relation between different interdependent elements. So that's those famous 8 simile, which we found in many sutras, are so important. So now, if we, as it says here, the bodhisattva who knows that phenomena are like illusion, with skill in the patience of the profound Dharma, who has the patience of the profound Dharma, has no desire for any phenomena that cause desire, has no anger toward any phenomenon that cause anger, and has no ignorance regarding any phenomenon that cause ignorance. Because once one has realized the root cause for suffering and ignorance, then it's like, when it's often given an example in the scripture that when a magician emanates, it says, bull carts and whole armies and flowers and horses and so forth. We might be fooled by that, but the magician himself or herself knows that those are pure illusions, so he will not cling to the treasury of the beautiful woman that he has created, because he knows that it appears and is devoid of intrinsic existence. So therefore, the first patience is to bear all suffering. And there are many ways that transform them into catalysis on the path. And so for that, there are also different kinds of practices we find in the different lineages of Tibetan Buddhism and Buddhists at large. For instance, there is, in some teaching, you find about what's called Dokkom, which is called reverse or paradoxical meditation, which is that we will actually meditate and accept and welcome with great joy what normally people would try to get rid of it, like suffering, criticism, blame, all kinds of unfortunate circumstances. And why we will do so? Because precisely that's what will allow us to progress on the practice. So that's also joined with the second aspect of patience, which is to accept all the harms that people are doing to us. And they say, why should I do that? So then the paradoxical meditation is precisely to say, oh, that's such a wonderful opportunity to be trained on patience, because that's what I'm here for. I know it's very easy, but there's no need to practice. How can we practice patience with people who treat us wonderfully well? That doesn't work. We need to exercise patience for those who do mischief to us. There's a well-known story of Patrul Rinpoche going into coming up into a sort of cave or hermitage, and he went in, and there was a hermit in deep meditation, and then he sat there for a while, and then at some point he asked, "Oh, hello, what are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm meditating on patience." He said, "Patience? Really? How do you do that?" And then he kept on a bit disturbing that meditator. And at the end, he blew up the fuse, the meditator. He said, "What are you coming here? I'm trying to meditate on patience, and here you come to disturb me." And then Patrul would say, "Haha, now where is your meditation on patience?" So that's why. So the paradoxical meditation is precisely to use adverse circumstances in order to progress on the path. Now, in order to avoid the criticism, adverse circumstances, and enemies, and so-called enemies, of course, the solution is not to sort of eliminate them, the whole world, and no more enemies, no more people doing bad things about us. That will never work. That's very clearly explained in the Bodhisattva. He said, if the whole earth will covered with thorns, you will never end removing the thorns, and then some will grow behind you as soon as you have removed them. So he said the only way is to cover the sole of your feet with thick leather. So that's precisely what patience is about, is to not minding when people sort of create difficulties for us. Now, and then we say, it is said in the how powerful is this kind of practice. And so it says in the Bodhisattva that what is said, yes, there's basically no such a incredible practice as patience, and nothing as harmful for the practice as anger and animosity. So yes, so then well, we see that all the times, in daily life. We always think, why me? Why not me? Why did they say that about me? Why didn't they praise me? Why don't they respect me? So obviously you can see how much is come from a exacerbated sense of self-importance. Because if you don't have this self as a target, what do you care what people say? Now we say it's like empty echoes. It's like speaking about a dead person. And if we mind so much, it's precisely because there is a strong grasping to the self that is present there as a target. The example often given, if you are in front of a cliff and you shout some insults, oh, you are such a scoundrel, you are a bastard, and all that, and it comes back to you, and you laugh because it's you who said that, and so you don't think that about yourself, so you don't care too much. But if someone next to you said the same thing, then you mind so much, because then you know that your ego, your self-grasping is being targeted. Or imagine you are sleeping in the middle of a lake, taking a nap in a little boat and drifting slowly on a beautiful day. And then suddenly, bam, another boat rams in yours. So why are you there? And then you see it's just a drifting boat, nobody inside. So then you laugh. Why? What's the difference? In both ways you were waken up. But in the case where there's no one in, then you were not the target. Your ego was not targeted. And the second case, if there's someone, you say, what is this guy? Wow, he dares to do that. So it's always like that. When we say, oh, I need some respect, I need to be so and so. Why they do that to me? Why they're not bringing that to me, and so forth. So that's basically really completely embedded in the 8 worldly preoccupation: gain and loss, pleasure and displeasure, blame and praise, and notoriety and anonymity. So those 8 worldly dharmas, for instance, right now, I happily completed, with the help of some friend, a translation of a beautiful commentary by Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche on the Treasury of Essential Instruction of Longchenpa, that will be published, I think, next year. And then in that, Longchenpa relentlessly, tell us how to be careful of getting rid to the root of the 8 worldly concerns. And then you also mingle that with wonderful teachings. So that's a very important point, especially in an age where nowadays, there's a kind of hyper-individualistic society in many ways. We lost a little bit the sense of the collective. In some places, there's even a narcissistic epidemic is going on. So that's not going to help us remedy to the cause of suffering. So now also, the third one is to the endurance toward the profound Dharma. So that's has different aspects. It's also the endurance to start with Dharma practice itself, before endurance to the ultimate meaning of emptiness. So that means that we should be ready to go to or whatever may happen in the course of our practice, for the sake of continuing our practice. In the past, so many great masters like Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, almost 30 years in solitary retreats. It's almost unthinkable now. He didn't do that just to mortify himself. He did that precisely to become what he became, to manifest his quality. Even he had such an incredible potential as being considered to be the mind-heart emanation of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. So, we started with something that even though we all have the Tathagata Garbha, and as Jimmy Krishnamurti said, that's we are living now in the age of entitlement. I'm entitled to this and that. You should respect me, do this. He said the only thing we are entitled truly is the Buddha nature. That's we can claim for it. We can do everything to actualize it and so forth. So therefore, we need to, for that sake of that, we need to be able, sometimes our practice may go well, we may have everything we need in terms of, outer circumstances and conditions and provisions and everything like that. Sometimes we may face some hardship, but if we see it as something that is somehow comes our way while not losing the direction of our practice, then we have to be really ready to bear with discomfort, with sometimes not having all what we might need in terms of provision momentarily. Of course, always avoiding falling into excess. We don't need to starve ourselves to almost come at the edge of death, because that also will be the end of the precious human life. But we did not need to fall either into the other extreme of going to retreat with magnificent provisions and so forth, or accumulating for our old age, thinking if I'm getting old, what will happen to me, or starting accumulating things, and in the end we never come to practice. So all those, worrying about the possible difficulty of the practice is something that makes us delay again and again and again really getting into the practice. So we need to have the endurance to do so. And it says, for instance, when we engage in the retreat, for instance, first we should not be overconfident about our capacity. So first we should make a commitment for just a short time. So, okay, even in the depth, I wish I'm hoping I can stay here for a number of months or years in the hermitage in the mountain or somewhere. But let's make a promise for 1 month, and let's do it well and complete it in the proper way. And if we succeed in doing that, then it's more likely that we will succeed when we increase the length of the practice. If we make too much of a big statement or commitment from the beginning and we fail, we decide to go out in the middle of it, then this will become a recurrent phenomena, obstacle, and we'll never be able to complete something. So we must be ready to face the obstacles. And one of the ways is to see that, as it says, an obstacle that is overcome becomes a siddhi. So that in a way, it can become a catalyst if we know how to deal with obstacle. And there are many ways to deal with obstacle, to see them as a boon for opportunity to practice, like someone who scolds us and we practice patience. Or if we are stingy, that practice generosity is an antidote to stinginess. But also, as Jimmy Limpa himself said, it's like a broom to sweep out all the negative karma that we have accumulated. So actually we should rejoice. Now I have this difficulty now, this sickness that normally I will not want, but I welcome it with joy, because that's now something that's helped me purify of past negative karma, and I need that to progress further on the path. So in a way, it's transforming obstacle into accomplishment. So all those difficulties from the perspective of patience to be austerity is like a wish-fulfilling gem for our practice. So then, famous example, for instance, of Atisha. He had an attendant that was an Atsara. Atsara means someone from India, a practitioner from India, and who was very short-tempered. And so Atisha kept him throughout his life. And he said, well, because I need him as a support for improving my practice on patience. So yes, and also another way to be able to cultivate patience toward suffering, towards unwanted circumstances, towards criticism, and so forth, is to have a much vaster mind. So that also leads us slowly to the third aspect of patience. We can give an example about that. Now, suppose you put a handful of salt in a glass of water. Obviously, the water becomes undrinkable. Now, that's a small mind that minds everything, Why me? Why not me? And then all the thoughts bounce on the edge of the glass, and it's ceaselessly disturb us. We say, Nam Tok Tralang, all the world arises as enemy because our thoughts see the whole world as potential enemies. So that's a storm in the glass of water, if you want, but more like undrinkable water. But if you put the same handful of salt in a huge lake, no big deal. So it's like if you somehow break down this little sort of confined space of self-clinging. No, it feels stuffy in the ego grasping. And then you let that merge with the immense space of the nature of mind without fear. Then those thoughts will get lost in space like birds passing through the sky without leaving any trace. So that leads us to the third aspect, which is really the one that is developed in this 9th chapter. So, which is the forbearance or acceptance of the ultimate truth or ultimate meaning. Oh yes, and just to add about patience on the path. Now we should remember what Milarepa said. He said, on the beginning, nothing comes. In the middle, nothing stays. At the end, nothing goes. So that's very nicely summarized. So in the middle, nothing comes. People start to meditate. Oh, no, I'm not good for meditation. I have even more thoughts than before. Well, it's not that they are more thoughts than before. It's that suddenly, by looking into their mind, they became aware of the catastrophe. This blah, blah, blah all the time, what Miguel Rinpoche called the blah, blah of the neurons, the bala, bala, bule. So that we didn't see because we were distracted. When we see it, say, my, what's going on here? And this mind that I deal from morning till evening can be my best friend and my worst enemy. So then, so we start like that. And then in the middle, so in the beginning is the most difficult. So worldly pleasures are very easy right from the start. So easy, to sit on the beach, eating an ice cream and so forth. There's no difficulty at all. But then comes the problems later of every samsaric thing. So here, beginning, it may look a little bit austere. But then in the middle, we start appreciating more and more the transformation that is going on. But it doesn't stay. Sometimes we have it, sometimes not. It's like mist disappearing in the morning. So then we should not give up, of course. And even, as Jimekans Rinpoche said, if we feel bored sometime in the meditation, it is not the fault of meditation. It is our own shortcoming. So in fact, it is very important to persevere, even in those moments where we don't really feel to go on, because that's where the actual change is going to take place. The real laundry is starting to move. And then in the end, nothing goes. So that's like validation is like sky. So that's what it says. And this also relates to what we call nyam, or meditative experiences. We may have sometimes experiences of bliss, of clarity, of thoughtlessness, of conceptlessness, but they won't stay. And also they are, like if we make fire, there is smoke. If we practice, there will be some experiences, but we should definitely not grasp to it, cling to it, want that they stay, want to rekindle again and again, like taking some kind of euphoric drug that give sort of set of euphoria. We should just see, okay, they are like landscape that you see when traveling in India through the train. You see all kinds of things, buffaloes and rice pads and people going here and there. But you don't come out of the train each time you see something that looks interesting. So see that along the way, but not grasp to it. And then in the end, nothing goes. So in the beginning, experiences appear like mist and they dissipate, or it says like a patch on a cloud, it will eventually fall off. While ultimate realization, not in the end, nothing goes, is like the unchanging space. No matter how many clouds and thunders and this and that, the space behind the clouds is always there, unchanged. The sun is always shining. Even there's a whole year of a clouded sky, the sun has never ceased to shine. The space has never seemed to be pure, immaculate, and luminous. So that's what will come eventually. And that's also, we need forbearance or patience toward effort. Now, we live in a civilization where we don't want to make any effort. So that's not going to work. If they tell you, once I was asked in India, I participated to some kind of conclave or something, and the person who was interviewing with me said, could you give us the secret for happiness in 3 weeks and 3 points? So I said, no, I'm very sorry. There's no secret, and there's no 3 points, and it takes a whole life to get rid of suffering, but that's the best thing you can do. So in a way, superficial changes, if someone tells you, or if you feel by doing something that you have completely changed in 3 weeks, that's quite suspicious. So this is like fireworks, they will fall back. So Patrul Rinpoche always reminds us that the real progress is what comes slowly, gradually over time. When you look back, like 5 years, 10 years, you see how much you have become more free from animosity, or maybe hatred completely left your mind. The idea of willingly harming someone is completely gone from your mind. I remember Pema Wangyal Rinpoche telling about people who did 3 years retreat and even more. He said, I don't know about how much accomplishment they have, but no, I'm quite sure that none of them will willingly harm someone. So that's already quite remarkable result if we see this condition of the world now, where people are so much inclined to harm each other in inconceivable ways, and so barbarian ways. So if you can get rid of hatred, that's really an incredible result. So, and if after 15 years of practice, people tell, oh, he's just the same as before, so short temper and everything. So basically, we might have been fooling ourselves. So of course, it's not easy to change, but it is gradual change. It's like looking at a clock in the big railway station. If you stare at it, it seems that the arm of the clock are not moving. But if you look every 10 minutes, something has changed. So that's what Patrul Rinpoche would say. Sudden changes will not last. What we need is a slow, gradual changes over time that will really reflect the progress of the practice. Of course, then people might be more or less gifted. As it says in the scripture, some will see the progress day after day, some month after month, some years after years. But we need to check, basically, how much have we changed? And that's the purpose of the whole thing. Otherwise, we are just, again, distracting ourselves in different ways. So then finally, the patience with the ultimate meaning is that we feel, in fact, not only we feel completely comfortable with the teaching on the ultimate truth, especially the union of appearance and emptiness. We don't feel threatened by emptiness. As we said before, if we teach emptiness to those who are not ready, their sort of brain explodes because they cannot bear that, because they think suddenly like it become nothing. So this was in the 19th century in Europe. They didn't understand Buddhism at all because there were so few texts translated. And many writers then in the 19th century, which were from a theistic background, they said that what a dreadful religion or spiritual tradition that Buddhism, completely devoid of anything just but the mere nothingness. What a terrible sort of philosophy or perspective. So of course, as we know, this is one of the two extremes in which a practitioner should not fall. But not to have a sort of fear, like when we sit at the edge of a precipice, we feel vertigo when we think of emptiness. That's also come with familiarization. And I remember when there are so many wonderful occasions to be in the presence of His Holiness the Dalai Lama during the various meetings or as an interpreter. He said how for like all his life, more than 60 years, for several hours, 3 to 4 hours in the morning before dawn, he was practicing on compassion, compassion, and emptiness, emptiness. So the union of compassion and emptiness. That's the union of wisdom and skillful means. So often in the Buddhism, we compare these two as the two wings of a bird. So the wisdom of emptiness and the compassion, the skillful mean of compassion. And they need to grow together. Like Shapkar in his autobiography said, just as a mother needs a son, emptiness needs the son of compassion. And people who say they realize emptiness but have no compassion is not going to work. And those two wings need to be trained together. A bird doesn't first learn for a few months just to fly with one wing and then the other one. He gains strength in both wings. So we need to cultivate at the same time the understanding of the view of emptiness and the practice of compassion that should imbue all our thoughts, words, and action. So that's the way to unite wisdom and methods, emptiness and compassion, and then to have this final acceptance of the ultimate truth. So as one of the other sentences in the sutra, it says, existing and not existing are in conflict. Pure and impure are also in conflict. But when there is conflict, suffering cannot be ended. When there's no conflict, suffering ceases. So there's no conflict between appearance and emptiness, no conflict between wisdom and compassion. Then we can progress without obstacle towards enlightenment. And it says later, it is impossible for peace to come from any other cause. And by peace, we mean the pacification of ignorance, the pacification of the causes of suffering. So that's in order, again, to be able to gain the capacity to free all beings from suffering. So finally, the sutra says, wise ones, reach enlightenment by putting into practice the samadhi of dwelling in love, of dwelling in compassion, of acting with joy, and with constant equanimity toward all existence. The perceived beings afflicted by illness and aging, they have compassion toward them and give them the teaching of ultimate truth. So that's remind me of a teaching once I received from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I was doing a one-year retreat in our retreat center here in Nepal, and I interrupted that for a month because my father was dying in France and I had to translate for His Holiness in Belgium. So at the end, I mentioned to His Holiness, I'm going back into retreat. Do you have any advice? And he says, in the beginning, meditate on compassion. In the middle, meditate on compassion. In the end, meditate on compassion. So I cannot share a better advice than that. And sorry for keeping on distracting you. In France, there is the share car. There is a website for sharing car when you travel. It's called the Blabla car. So I'm the sort of Blabla monk. So I apologize for my shortcomings, and you may forget about it anytime. So very happy to meet you on this occasion of the Chötrul Düchen, and sorry for distracting you from your own practice. Thank you so much. And I hope I was not too fast for the translators because I try to slow down, but it just doesn't work.
Thank you so much, Venerable Matthieu, for such an inspiring teaching. I have so many thoughts, and we have some great questions from our listeners today. I'll share just a few of them. One person asks, if we accept everything, how can we act to improve the environment, like
Well,
globally?
okay, sure. Well, first of all, acceptation is a very ambiguous concept. So it's completely vain to say the past should be different. And even the present should be different. I don't accept that. It should not be. So it's total waste of time. Present is there. So that's one of the most time-wasting endeavor, that the present should be different and being upset about it. So that's why it says in the teaching on karma, we are the result of the past, or situation might be collective karma or whatever, but we are the architect of the future. So yes, of course, we are here to work to remove the cause of suffering. So it's nothing. So resignation. So there's no way of feeling resignation towards the cause of suffering. That's all we are trying to do. And in fact, again, Jimmy Kensen Rinpoche said once, Buddhism is about remedying to the suffering and its cause. That's it. And of course, it can go very deep when we speak of the cause of suffering, going down to ignorance. So anything, whether in the teaching, in the building some monuments, in our behavior, that doesn't go toward reducing the cause of suffering, or even worse, that increase suffering, that's not Dharma, full stop. That's the ultimate criteria. Are they working towards alleviating suffering, or they are compounding suffering on top of each other? So we are only there for that, but all way, completely dedicated for lives and lives to come to remove suffering. So this patience is not about resignation. It's precisely about not feeling overburdened, overwhelmed, discouraged, because I can't cope with that. Those guys are impossible. How can I do everything? The world is hopeless and human nature is bad. So if we think like that, of course, nothing to do. But we say, no, everything is because causes and conditions. Even the situation is very dire. Then there is cause and condition. We can bring new causes and conditions and remedy to suffering. For instance, 25 years ago, Ramjan Rinpoche and myself, we started an organization called Karuna Sechen, and today, 25 years later, we are helping 500,000 every year in India, Nepal, and a little bit in Tibet. So that's one way to relieve suffering. Of course, it's temporary, to remove extreme poverty, sickness, and so forth, but also even temporary suffering needs to be remedied. All kinds of suffering that comes within the field of your attention, but does not deal with the ultimate cause of suffering, which is ignorance, distorting reality. So there's not a moment of resignation, of accepting situation that perpetuate endless suffering, whether it's within the Dharma, whether it's in the world. Any way we can remedy to cause of suffering is what we need to do. So that's clear, and we should be ready, to carry that burden for life and life to come, without hesitation. That's the Bodhisattva vow. So there's no place for resignation in the Bodhisattva vow.
Thank you. That's so helpful. That's so helpful and easy to remember. It doesn't mean resignation. That's very helpful. We also have a question. Is self-compassion important? So you emphasized compassion at the end of your talk, and would you have anything to share about self-compassion?
Well, we know self-compassion is a concept that's very much used in modern psychology. I must confess that at the beginning, I thought it's another way for this super individualistic culture to recuperate the concept of compassion. I was completely wrong. And later, by meeting people like Christine Neff and especially Paul Gilbert, with whom I became very close, which is spent his whole life dedicated to self-compassion. I understood that, people who have self-hate, and I remember also an occasion during one of the Mind and Life meeting when a psychologist spoke to the Dalai Lama about self-hate. Well, he first turned to his translator, to Denjiba, and asked what did he say, and then we confirmed. He said, it's impossible. And then psychologist said, yes, we're sorry, Your Highness, there is people who have self-hate. He said, no, it cannot be. And what he meant is not that people have self-hate. Of course they have. They report they are not good enough, or maybe because they have been abused, or they suffer so much that they don't even see any good quality in themselves. But he said basically that comes precisely from the deep cause of ignorance, of self-grasping, and so forth. But fundamentally, even people who despise themselves, if there was a chance to get out of that, and for sure, even they think that happiness is not for them for the rest of their life. But if we show a possibility, they will take it. I mean, they are not specifically enjoy suffering. They think that it's hopeless. So then it was quite important. And then Paul Gilbert used to say also that unless you sort of wish yourself good in some way, just to make it very short, it's very hard to wish good for others. And actually, it comes, when I thought about it more, it really corresponds to the basic Buddhist teaching about generating compassion. First, you look within yourself and you say, of course, I don't want suffering. Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, I suffer the whole day and if possible, my whole life. So then, if I wish to avoid suffering, then I have to be careful, distinguish what brings suffering and what may liberate me from suffering. So I get concerned about that. And then I realize that I cannot do just anything that pleases, and keeping, as the Rinpoche Moshe would say, keeping my hand in the fire and hoping not to be burned. So there's something, and one of the basic aspects of Buddhist teaching is what to accomplish, what to avoid in order to avoid suffering. So that's, I will start implementing that if I want to get rid of suffering. And then now, it doesn't take rocket science to transport myself in other people's mind and say, they may be as confused as I am, but deep within, there's no one who wishes to suffer the whole life. Even they might say happiness not for me. So then I become concerned by their fate. I act in a way that distinguishes things that may harm them or benefit them. So that's basic of discipline of moral ethics, the second sort of paramita. And I engage in action to slowly remove their suffering. So in a way, that first step is the equivalent of self-compassion. We don't find very much the term self-compassion, except explain as I just tried to explain now. That's very common in Buddhist teaching. But there is, I found one teaching which I'm also engaged in translating by Gyalwa Götsampa. He was a very famous, a bit like Milarepa in the Drupa Kagyu tradition. He was disciple of Tsampa Gyare. He one who opened the pilgrimage of Mount Kailash. And in his teaching on loving kindness and compassion, he has a whole chapter, section on self-compassion. And he said, unless you start loving yourself, wishing good to yourself, and then there's no way you can start wishing good for others. And Patrul Rinpoche also says that, in the treasury of enlightened ones, the Tokta Parsum Gewetam, he says, basically, who wants harm for themselves? Even we don't know how to get out of it. Basically, we all would like something good for ourselves, at the end of the tunnel. So then we have to act accordingly. So in a way, self-compassion is the way to recognize that just as I don't want to suffer, it would be so nice if I could find a way out of it. Even I'm at the bottom of the pit. If I was given a few steps to get out, I will take the chance. So that's very important to recognize that, because that allows us to transport in others' mind. And again, if even they are confused about like us, addicted to the cause of suffering, realize that it will be better for them as well. So then the second step is we can get to that, but first it is necessary to recognize that deep within, otherwise we will not be concerned by others.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's a really helpful answer as well. I hadn't made that connection to that aspect of the teachings as self-compassion, and it really really does make sense. Um, I think we have time just for one more question. Um, and we have another interesting question that maybe connects with one that you answered previously. So maybe a footnote that would be possible. So one of our listeners asks, does patience mean condoning others' negative actions? And I think you already sort of answered that at this point. How can we find the right balance in our aspirations? And here they say, for example, children who are spoiled may have some problems as they grow up. And as a mother, I'm curious about this also, about how that balance of
Sorry,
uh,
I was not hearing properly. Can you repeat?
oh, sure. So this person asks, how can we find the right balance in our aspirations in terms of our patience? So, for example, children who are spoiled may have some problems as they grow up. So, like, especially if we're in the position of guiding others, how to balance that, like, um, acceptance versus guidance or correction, I guess, is one way of saying it. If we're especially if others are sort of in our care.
Well, yes. So, basically, patience again is not being like a carpet which everyone can tread. Actually, patience give a great deal of courage because you are not going to be destabilized by adverse circumstances, and that applies in general in life. Impatient people, they are the worst to deal with adversity. So now, if you have a very vast mind, of course, like parents for their children, that vast mind allows them to see that not to be just become completely exasperated by the child's behavior, but have even space by not being themselves, disturbed. They are sort of self-grasping, being annoyed by the child's behavior, but have a much bigger space of love and compassion to see that it is not good for the child. Just in the same way that in the Bodhisattva, it said to let a harmful person continue his or her harmful action is good for nobody. It's not good for those who are victims of the negative action. And if we think about it, it's not even good at all to let that person do that, because it's, according to Buddhism, is accumulating karma for a lot of suffering in future. So by using different means to put an end to harmful behavior, you're actually helping everyone, including the perpetrator. So in the case of education, this is the same, with much love, to make sure that the child do not engage and then it becomes, becomes an ingrained sort of trait in behavior that will end up in suffering for the child. So you are just trying to prevent the child from building up cause of recurrent sufferings. So that's why a loving, but a loving attitude and a conduct that is imbued with discernment about what will help the child to become a good human being and not be overpowered by past tendencies that may, cause the child to behave in difficult ways. So in modern education, it says not a completely permissive education, or the king child, which is very often happens in narcissistic cultures. In the US, I heard that 7 out of 10 dress for little girl says princess. So they are not princess basically, and even in the school you become last in a competition or something in gymnastics. They give you a certificate for good participation because they don't want to harm your self-esteem. So self-esteem is just a path directly to narcissism, while self-confidence is different. To like self-compassion doesn't lead. I mean, there's been a study done actually that self-esteem actually lead to more narcissism, but self-compassion does not, which is interesting. You know your limitation, you accept them, and you accept to grow through them. So neither a fully permissive education, that is too often the case, nor an authoritarian one, to try to, by force, to make the child behave properly. So for that, there are many ways. He said, for instance, the living example already. The parents should embody what they are trying to teach to the children, and make them do things with you in the right way, and to set the limit, because the children are always exploring the limits, try to see how far they can push their tantrums. So we could call that an enlightened education that is based on discernment and kindness, while maybe outwardly sometimes assuming a bit austere and strict behavior, as we say often, for the good of the child. So, but it should be really for the good of the child, not for your good. I'm totally fed up and I cannot stand that anymore. No, I'm blowing the fuse. That's not what you set the limit for, but for the good of the child, not overcome some limit that will eventually harm the child. So anyway, there was if you are interested, I wrote a small chapter in the book of altruism about this kind of studies on different types of education and which one is the more conducive for the child to be for flourishing.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. This is a really special occasion for me. I'm so glad that we were able to learn from you today. I'm sad actually to wrap up, but I see that we've just hit our time limit for today. So please, everyone, we just want to all thank you so much. So really thank you to Venerable Matthieu for taking the time to share your wisdom with us. I think it was inspiring for me on a personal level. I also feel like I understood the text in a completely different way. I hadn't been focusing on those different aspects of patience when I was first looking at it. I was sort of zooming in on the details. So for all of our listeners, to learn more about Venerable Matthieu's extensive activities, including his teachings, his books, and humanitarian efforts, please visit matthieuRicard.org. Please also watch for future teachings on sutras that 84,000 will host. These will occur on or around every Duchen day of this year. And you can also learn more about upcoming teachings on Sutra and other news and events by signing up for our newsletter and following us on social media. And just want to thank everyone again for attending.
So I just want to add one concluding word.
Okay. Oh,
about
please, please.
No, sorry, about dedication.
Yes, I was going to say we should dedicate the merit.
No, but the point that I want to make is I don't think I have myself accrued any merit by distracting you and saying completely disconnected things. But the very fact that we have been quoting and the wonderful sutra and evoking the memories and the teachings of great masters, that certainly has some sort of positive, something positive for our part. So dedication is we say is very important because it ensure the continuity of whatever positiveness we have built together by being there today. And it says it is, if we don't do it, it's like a snowflake falling on a hot stone. It evaporates. But if we dedicate, then it's a snowflake falling on a big lake. It doesn't disappear as long as the lake is there. And it says it's also somehow make it immune. Says if I get angry in 3 minutes, if I've dedicated already, it's no more in my hands, so it might be protected, although it's better not to get angry in 3 minutes. So therefore, the dedication is always twofold. For the immediate relieving of suffering, wherever it happens, and I think we know in our times, our incredible magnitude of suffering is afflicting human beings, man-made sufferings, which are completely unnecessary, and which definitely come from hatred. That's clear. That's if you want to have any proof of the deleterious effect of hatred, you can see that. But in the long term, that to remedy to the deep cause, to deep causes of what brings those terrible suffering. So of course, on the societal level is maybe through education, through having different cultures, different values in civilization that will not bring to power people who are inclined to massacre each other. But also more ultimately, because we will never get rid of all that without progressing to enlightenment so that all sentient beings may achieve freedom from samsara and the omniscience of enlightenment. So let's do that, and we don't have to stop and pretend to be silent and meditating, but let's keep doing that in our hearts. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you. And thank you for leading us. Would you like to lead us in a dedication?
No, I don't have anything to read, but if you want, please do so.
Good. Okay. Well, we can all dedicate in our practice. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for coming. This is a wonderful event. I'm so happy to have been part of this teaching.
Okay,
thank you
everyone.
And take care. Thank you.
Sorry for the translator.
Good
again.
night.
Okay. Bye-bye.
It was wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Au revoir, Anne.